We're ready when you are.
Okay, right. Okay, good evening. It's now, I think, 3 minutes past 7, and I'd like to start the meeting of the Corporate Parenting Committee. I'm Councillor Elizabeth Rigby, and I'm the chair of this committee. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting is being live streamed to the Council's YouTube account and also being recorded for publication on the Council's website. I would also like to remind members and officers to mute their microphone when they're not speaking and to use the raise your hand option when you wish to speak. Give everyone the opportunity to speak at the end of each item. Item 1, apologies for absence. I haven't received any apologies for absence. Kenna, have you received any apologies?
Thank you. No, there's no apologies being received.
No. Item number 2, the minutes of last meeting. I move that the minutes of the Corporate Parenting Committee meeting held on the 2nd of June 2020 be recorded as a correct record. Are there any comments on the accuracy of the minutes? Oops, there's a hands up there, shall I?
Hi, yeah, I've just done that to let Kenna know that Jen's downloaded Microsoft Teams, but she can't seem to open the email. Is there any other way we could get her on?
Bear with me, and I'll send you another email, and I will try. We'll get her on.
Okay.
Okay. So I take it the minutes are approved. I've not agreed to any items of urgent business this evening, so we can move to item number 4. Item number 4 is declarations of interest. Does anyone wish to declare a declaration of interest? Okay. Yeah. No hands, so that's good. So item number 5, Children's Social Care Performance Report. Can I ask the officers to introduce the report, please?
Chair, sorry, if I may, it might be an idea maybe just ask officers and members to introduce themselves, just so we know who's present, just before we go into the items.
Okay, so please may the officers and members introduce themselves before we start with item number 5.
Shall I start? I'm Councillor Barry Johnson. I'm the ward member for Orsett and also the lead member for housing.
I'm Councillor Redstall, Councillor for Little Thurrock Blackshots and former chair.
Councillor Steve Lydiard, Councillor for Chelmsford and Chads.
Councillor Chuku, the Ward Councillor of Chadworth and Mary. Thank you.
Councillor Sushinit, Councillor for Ockenden.
I introduce myself. I'm Janet Simon. I'm the strategic lead for SynCP.
Hello everybody, my name is Joe Tynan. I'm the Interim Assistant Director for Children's Social Care and Early Help.
Hello everyone, I'm Sheila Murphy, the Corporate Director for Children's Services.
I'm named Tara Kosler and I'm the Strategic Lead for Children Looked After.
Good evening, I'm Andy Moore. I'm the Strategic Lead for Business Intelligence.
Good evening. Good evening. I'm Annie Kidowski and I work with the Children in Care Council and Open Door.
Good evening, my name. Sorry. Good evening. I'm just going to say I'm Jane Foster-Taylor. I'm the Chief Nurse for Thurrock Clinical Commissioning Group.
Hi, my name is Michael Ado Boating. I am the Children's Safeguarding Children's Specialist Nurse for Thurrock CCG, and I work with Jane Foster-Taylor.
My name is Christopher Bennett and I'm Vice Chair of the Children in Care Council.
My name is Rafael Antunes and I'm Chair of the Children in Care Council.
Hi, my name's Sharon Smith. I'm the Chair of the One Team Foster Carers Association.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Chair, I think that's everybody. I think we're ready to continue if you're happy to.
Thank you, Kenna, and thank you everyone for introducing themselves. So we'll move on to item 5, which is the children's social care performance. Please may I ask officers to introduce the report.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. As I said before, I'm Mandy Moore. I'm the strategic lead for business intelligence, and I will take you through the report this evening. Just to touch on the executive summary, this report relates to Q1 of 2021, which covers months April to June 20, and we've included comparisons to the same quarter in the previous year. The data is obtained through the At a Glance, which is a monthly performance scorecard, as well as regional benchmarking data and national data sets, and we present that information and discuss it with the social care senior management team on a monthly basis. Where possible, we've included statistical neighbour and England averages for comparison, but it's important to note that those figures actually relate to 18-19, as the 19-20 figures have not yet been published. Obviously, once we have those available, we'll include those in the reports going forward. Okay, so moving on to the introduction and background. This is to provide an overview of the children's social care performance, and it describes activity levels and the social care services and how they respond to the needs of vulnerable children. I plan to run through each of the sections and cover highlights rather than each of the areas in detail, but I noted that the chair said that we'll have an opportunity to ask questions between each item. So in relation to section 3, the practice summary of performance and trends, to give some context, in Q1, we have actually received a lower amount of contacts into the service, actually a 35.5% drop. This is felt to be directly related to the COVID-19 lockdown. We usually get quite a high majority of our referrals coming in from schools, and obviously they were not open during that period. That also has been the same for referrals. During Q1, we actually received a drop of 27.4%, in alignment with where we were this time last year. We are, however, expecting a spike in numbers of contacts and therefore referrals. It's being anticipated as the Thurrock schools will start to reopen. Is interesting when we get to section 3.3, however, is that actually the numbers of assessments that we've completed this quarter against last year's quarter has actually increased. So that is an indication that although the contacts and referrals have reduced, we're actually getting a higher percentage of referrals that are resulting in an assessment being required. I thought it was important to bring that information in because the actual completion timescales obviously look to be a few percent lower than this time last year. But obviously, once we know that there was that increase of 33.3% in the number of assessments, that just adds a bit of context as to why the timescales may not have been met at the same level. Moving down to section 3.5, this looks at the number of cases that are stepped down to early help. We've actually seen an increase in the number for Q1. We had 39 cases that were stepped down compared to 23 for the same period last year. So this is an increase of 70%, which is very positive. It is important to note that all the data continues to be monitored on a monthly basis to ensure that the decision making within the multi-agency safeguarding hub remains robust and ensures that families are supported by the most appropriate service. Moving down into section 4, numbers of children looked after. We've actually seen a 7.1 increase during Q1 of this year against where we were last year. Now, according to the year-end SSDA 903 data that was published for 18-19, a national England average increase is usually around 4%. So we are only marginally above that. And with the numbers that we have within our cohort, that actually works out to be an average of 14 children, whereas the 4% average would be 8 children. So we are only just marginally above that. You can see there that we've got the graphs that give you the breakdown of the numbers of children open at the end of each month during both those quarters. 4.2 goes on to have a look at the rates. And there is a chart there that also shows the rate per 10,000 of the population. And you can see from the Thurrock line in blue that we are sitting between the statistical neighbours and the England average. Again, as I mentioned beforehand, we don't yet have the data for 1920 to be able to bring that in, but we will do so as soon as we can. Under 4.3, the numbers of children that start to be looked after in the month. It was actually 42 for this quarter, which is slightly lower than the 48 that we had for the last quarter. We have a slightly higher rate of unaccompanied asylum seeker children compared to last year, 23.8% as opposed to 14.6. This actually equates to 3 children if you actually bring that down to numbers of children. Moving on to the next section, 4.4. This is around the number of children looked after that ceased to be looked after in month. There was 33 in this quarter compared to 55 in Q1. So there has been a 40% drop. This does continue to be monitored through the performance management meetings. Under 4.5, the unaccompanied asylum seeking children. As at the end of Q1 this year, there was a number of 22 unaccompanied asylum seeking children under CLA compared to 17 in the same quarter last year. And again, there's some graphs there to show the differences in the numbers. Within section 5, you can see a table there that does a breakdown by gender of our children looked after. Whilst the gender split of more males is in line with England average, we do have a slightly heavier male percentage. However, this has remained the same for Thurrock for 2019 and 2020. When we go to section 5.2, this covers the children looked after by an ethnicity breakdown. You can see there that it shows the different areas, and then we've also looked at the England average against this year's and last year's statistics. When looking at Thurrock figures, we can see there's a slightly higher percent for Black or Black British. The mixed dual background remains the same, and any other ethnic group has reduced by 1%. White has also reduced by 3%, although 2% have yet to have their ethnicity recorded. So we would need to see which category they fall within once recorded. Under section 5.3, in Q1 of 2020, it was very similar to Q1 last year, with a little change in the proportion of the children in each age group. For all age groups, and you'll be able to see from the chart that's been included below, we look to be in line with the national average. We don't seem to be an outlier on any of those areas. Moving down to section 5.4, this is around the category of need and the primary reasons why a child became looked after. The proportion of children within each category of need is very similar in both years. And again, you'll note from the chart that we've actually mapped that against the England average. So again, we do not look to be an outlier in those areas. Moving on to section 6, which relates to missing episodes of children looked after. You can see in the chart it maps our Q1 for this year against the same period for last year. This is positive as we've seen a reduction in both episodes started and the number of children that this relates to, with episodes around 16% decrease and the children a 20%. Moving on down to the next section, apologies. Under section 6, the return home interview, it's important to note in this section that from April the 1st of this year, Inspire Youth have been commissioned to undertake these interviews with the aim of improving performance and reducing missing episodes. And we actually are already starting to see through the data that we have seen an improvement in the percentage of children offered and also receiving a return home interview. Within section 7, this is around the timeliness of visits completed in timescale. The number of visits have increased, being completed in timescale against last year's quarter. And we've also seen an increase within quarter. So this very much does show an improving picture. For July, we was at 96.2%, and this does continue to be a focus within the performance meetings. Moving on to section 8, 8.1 relates to initial health assessments. So the number of the health assessments completed within 20 working days has actually doubled for this quarter than where we was at this time last year. And we've seen a 12.1% increase already in the quarter. The percentage that were referred to the health team for an initial health assessment within 5 working days, which obviously has an impact later if we don't meet that requirement, was 100% during the month of June, which compared to only 12.5% the same time last year. There's been a huge amount of work done in this area to look at the process and streamline it and to monitor the tasks and make sure that they are being sent to the deadline dates. And actually there is evidence of this being seen in the performance stats, which is really positive. The next section, 9, around the children looked after education. All of the children continue to make good educational progress. Obviously, we don't have a huge amount of detail around outturns of GCSE results, etc. at the moment in light of the impact of COVID. But as soon as we can obviously access any information in that regard, we will be sure to bring additional information into the report. For 9.1, around the strengths and difficulties questionnaire, we actually have an average score of 14.3 for this quarter compared to 14.5, so it's only marginally lower. And just for some context, when it comes to the strengths and difficulties questionnaire, a score of 13 or below is deemed to be within a normal range, and a score ranging from 14 to 16 is considered to be borderline. If it was 17 or above, it's indicative of a cause for concern. So at 14.3, we are within the normal, we are borderline. Moving on to section 10, around care leavers. The 16 to 21-year-old care leaver cohort has remained consistent. At the end of Q1, the total number of care leavers fully or partially engaged in education, employment or training was 131 compared to 94 for the same period last year, which is really positive. And you will see, I believe there is a chart, sorry, it's on the next page. You will see from the chart that's just over on the next page that we are above a statistical neighbour and England averages in this area. Moving on to the next section around our care leavers in suitable accommodation. We had 117 for last year and 182 for this year. So that's 65 more that are now recorded as being in suitable accommodation. There is a graph there to show that, and this is definitely an improving picture that is bringing us more in line with the national and statistical neighbour averages. 10.3, care leavers in touch. There was a 35.2% improvement in Q1 of this year. There's been an awful amount of work that's gone on to contribute to this. There's a close alignment of the aftercare service with the Inspire Youth Hub. There is an on-track Thurrock programme that offers bespoke programmes, and the care leavers are also provided with a Prince's Trust programme, which is a way to help them to build confidence. It is noted in the report that housing remains one of the key challenges for young people who are leaving care, and to address this, the service have further developed the Head Start housing programme, which will look to support the care leavers. Moving on to section 11, children looked after adoption. In Q1 of 2020, 1 child was adopted, which was compared to 4 for the same period last year. It's noted that this reflects the timing of children placed, the number of placement orders, and the impact of COVID on the court process. It is anticipated that 12 children will be placed for adoption by the end of Q2, so a greater number actually being processed in the second half of the financial year. Section 11.2, child entering care and moving in with its adoptive family. There is an indicator that looks at the number of average days, which is across a 3-year average for the child actually entering care and moving in with the adoptive parent. We, at 2017 to 20, were 426 days. The latest published stats that we had for England was 433 days, and that covered the 2016 to 19 period. For that same period, we came in just under that. So again, a positive message. 11.3, this is around the timescales, again, a 3-year average for the local authority receiving a court authority for placement and deciding on a match to a doctor. Again, this is positive, with Thurrock performing better than the England average and the statistical neighbour average for the 2015-18 period. Section 12 relates to the children looked after placements and permanency. So at the end of Q1, 17.5% of the total children looked after cohort of 305 were under the age of 5, and the majority of children under 5 are moved on to permanency through adoption or placement with connected carers and progressing through the court. Section 13 relates to fostering, and there's some high-level information there relating to the number of carers that have been approved between April 19 to date, which is 19. Apologies, that should say April 20. We'll need to get that corrected. And then the number of mainstream fostering applications currently in progress is 10. The number of children currently placed in Thurrock fostering households is 113 children. And that completes the presentation of that report.
Thank you very much, Mandy, for that very good report. Thank you. So do any members have any comments or questions, please?
Sorry, I tried raising my hand quite a while ago, but I have no idea how to do it, and I'm not entirely sure why. Really sorry. Just out of interest, and this is just something that I wondered. Do you think there's any reason why there seems to be more males than females in foster care?
I think Janet's raised her hand to give you a response on that one.
I'm not entirely sure, but one of the reasons in Thurrock is that we are a receiving authority for unaccompanied asylum seekers. Of our unaccompanied asylum seekers, the majority of those are male. We've maybe got 2 or 3 females in our unaccompanied asylum seeking population. So that can contribute quite a lot to in terms of our looked after numbers, because I think we're standing at something like 23 at the moment, and our looked after numbers are around 305. So that's about probably what, 8% or so. So that will have a contribution to the amount of males in our care population, and definitely in our care leaving population. I don't know if that helps at all.
Well, I don't think it was important. I just, because I was reading through it and I wondered why.
That's
Really?
it's a good question.
Thank you.
Chair, I think Councillor Redstone has a question.
Thanks, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks, Lizzie. Just a couple of questions actually for Mandy. The care leavers that are going into accommodation, are they shared accommodation or are they on their own? That was just one question. Do you want me to go into the other one, Mandy? Do the two together? So if you're coming back to me then, yeah?
Yes, of course.
The other one is just that Health and Wellbeing have asked me to come forward with this. The health assessments for the youngsters seem to be being late. Is that because of COVID, or is it because of they're having to do it across the phone or anything else? Can you just sort of something I can take back to Health and Wellbeing? Thank you.
Thank you. Again, I can see that Janet has raised her hand, and I think that may well be to answer your query there, Councillor Redsell.
You're on mute, Janet.
Oh, sorry. So sorry, the second bit of the question, did you say that was about initial health assessments? Councillor Redsell.
Sorry, Janet. Take my mic off in case you hear other things. Yeah, it's about children's assessments. It's come up on health and it's just come up on health and wellbeing that some of them were late or weren't being seen at all. So we just need to know, is it because of, you know, a situation we're in, or is it just another reason? Basically?
Okay, so a report was provided to Health and Wellbeing Board, and there's a report here tonight on initial health assessments from social care and from health, so we'll both be able to contribute towards that. For the first part of your question, in terms of where our care leavers go when they leave care, will depend really on their needs, how able they are to look after themselves, what kind of accommodation they're in. So some young people will stay in their foster placements under a staying put arrangement. Some of them will go into shared accommodation where they'll maybe get a little bit more support. Some may be in some type of supported accommodation where they get a certain amount of support hours, and some will go into their own accommodation. And for those that are at university, they may go into halls of residence or flats.
Lovely. Thanks, Janet, very much.
Okay.
Thanks, Mandy.
Are there any more questions at all?
No,
I can't see any more hands. In that case, are members in agreement with the recommendations on page 13?
Great.
1.1 and 1.2. Agreed. Excellent.
Agreed.
Excellent. So moving on to item 6, which is the fostering statement of purpose. Please may I ask an officer to introduce the report?
Okay, it's Janet Simon here, so I'll be introducing this report. So this is an annual report. I'm not going to go through it in detail because it's quite a big report, and I hope everybody's had an opportunity to read it. So this is the annual statement of purpose that we produce for the fostering service. And there's a requirement that local authorities produce an annual statement of purpose. So just kind of as an introduction, obviously Thurrock is a fostering service that's registered with Ofsted, and one of the things we have to do is compile an annual statement of purpose which sets out the aims and objectives of the service as a whole. So it talks about what we want to do in terms of a service and how we intend to meet the needs of our young people, how we support foster carers. It talks about the makeup of the team, how decisions are made. So there's stuff around the panel, talks about the different types of foster carers we have, the different teams within the service, how the teams are managed, how decisions are made. So it talks about who the agency decision maker is, and talks about how we recruit foster carers, connected carers, and go through the whole service really, and just kind of talks about how we are going to meet the needs of our young people and our fostering service. Hopefully people have had a chance to read it. If there are specific points that people would like to discuss, then I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Janet. So are there any questions or comments from members, please?
I have got my hand up, Lizzie.
Councillor Johnson, thank you.
Thanks, Lizzie. Janet, it's not really. I have read it, and as you said, it's a yearly report. I'm just thinking maybe to make it easier for the members on the committee to see, if it's a report that gets repeated quite a lot, is there no way we could just highlight, obviously produce the whole report, but highlight anything that has either changed or amended or been added, just to make it easier?
In terms of changes, I mean, our aims and our objectives remain largely the same. I think we're ambitious for our children and we want the best kind of service possible. Some of the changes we've made, so hold on. So in terms of the service, we've changed the structure slightly in terms of the fostering service. So we've gone from 3 teams to 4 teams. So we now have a recruitment team, which looks at the recruitment of foster carers and adopters. So it combines both adoption and fostering. So that team actually goes out, it does the advertising, it does recruitment, it does events, it does training, and they're really focused and trying to find different ways of recruiting foster carers, especially during COVID. And our foster carers are heavily involved in that, and they're a part of the recruitment as well. We have a connected persons team, which includes private fostering arrangements, and that team assesses all of our connected carers. So that's where children are unable to stay with their parents, and there is somebody within either the family or the within the family network who's able to care for the children. So they will do the assessments of those people. But also where children can't stay with their parents permanently, one of the things we might look at is special guardianship for children, and so they will do those assessments as well. We then have the fostering supports team, which looks at matching and in-house placements and provides supervision and support to all of our approved foster carers. So within the connected persons team, we have a social worker who supervises all of the connected carers as well. And then we have the placements team, which does all the searching for monitoring internal and external placements. So we've kind of just split it up slightly differently. So previously we had 3 teams, and we didn't have a specific connected persons team. So in terms of the leadership and management, I have been for the last 2 years the strategic lead for Children Looked After. As of the beginning of August, I've moved into SIN-CP, and Nentara Kozla, who's also in this call, I don't know, Nentara, if you want to introduce yourself, has taken over as a strategic lead for CLA. So that's one of the changes. All the other team managers, we've got some new team managers. So Alexandra Kuku is the new team manager for Connected Persons team. She's joined the team in the last 6 months, but all the other team managers have been with us for some time. The other changes is that we've reviewed our foster carers payments to make sure that we're in line with other local authorities and to make sure we're rewarding our foster carers appropriately. So we've looked at aiming to kind of look at how foster carers are paid, to make sure that children are appropriately matched and that they're getting the right support that they need. So those are the main changes that you'll see in terms of how we're working with our foster carers and how we're kind of meeting the needs of in terms of the service. I don't know if that's helpful or if there's anything else you think you would need to know.
No, that's fine, thank you. I'm just wondering if maybe on the report, if if there could be some kind of highlight of what the changes are, each time it comes up, just to draw people's attention to it. But thank you, thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you. Sorry, I can't see any more hands raised. Is that...
Apologies, I haven't got an electronic hand. It's Jane.
Oh, okay. Yep. Go ahead.
Apologies.
Yep.
I had it earlier. It's gone again today. Apologies. So no, really great report. Just an observation. Obviously, we have probably 2/3 of our children placed outside of Thurrock. And so when we talk about the IHAs and the RHAs later on in your reports that we will be presenting, it does have implications if we can't manage the fostering of our children or the placement of our children within Thurrock boundaries, because it has other implications, because you introduce other providers or you have geography. And so I know it's something that Sheila and I will pick up probably through the Brighter Futures Board, and we've picked up through SEND, but it is worth, I think, including within the reports at this point. I don't think it's unusual, but I think it has consequences on how effective we are if we have to place outside.
And obviously one of the things we do is we obviously want to recruit foster carers in Thurrock for our children, because we want them to be able to maintain their links with their communities, with schools. And so wherever possible, we try and place children within Thurrock, and we are obviously trying to increase the numbers of foster carers we have within the Thurrock boundaries.
Thank you. I can see that Sheila Murphy wants to speak, so go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just in response to what Jane's saying is, and Janet has said, we do want to place children in Thurrock as much as we can. We have some of our own Thurrock carers who are placed, who live outside of Thurrock, albeit near, but not actually in the Thurrock boundary. And I think the last sort of figures around children placed 20 miles away from their home address is something like 80%. So the majority of Thurrock children are placed close to home. It may not be within the borders of Thurrock itself, but are placed relatively close to Thurrock. I know that will have other issues for us. I just think in terms of this item, I'm not sure if the foster carers want to pass any comments, because the report reflects the service that supports them. So I don't know if they wanted to make any comments at all. They probably hate me for asking them that, but I just thought, as we've got 2 foster carers with us, it would be a bit remiss not to.
Sharon, I'll let you take this one.
Thank you, Jenny. Yes, I did have a good read through. I thought it was a really good report. It reflected really well on the support that the service have been offering to us as carers. And I think in response to some of the issues, obviously with initial health assessments and things, if it's for Thurrock carers, then they will do everything they can to actually come back into Thurrock, even if they live outside, to attend all of those things. I think it's just when we have those that are further afield or with independent fostering agencies, etc., that we then get more of the issues. But the health assessments altogether, the percentage has gone up quite a large amount from before. So I think it all looks really good.
That's great, lovely. Is there anyone else who would like to say anything or ask any questions? Yeah. Okay, thank you. So in that case, are members in agreement with the recommendations on page 29? I think it's just called recommendation 1.1.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. So we'll now move on to item 7, which is the adoption statement of purpose. And please may I ask an officer to introduce that report.
Hello, it's Janet Simon again. Obviously, this statement of purpose is in relation to our adoption service. So for those members who may not be aware, about a year and a half ago, we brought our adoption service back in-house. So a lot of our adoption service was being provided by Quorum prior to that. So we have reintroduced an adoption team within the service, and we have joined Thurrock Council has joined the Adopt East Alliance. So that's an alliance between local authorities in the eastern region. So that includes Essex, Hertfordshire, Suffolk, Norfolk, Beds, Luton, Southend, and 2 independent agencies, which is Adoption Plus and Barnardo's. So as a regional group, we are bringing all of our services together to support each other. So decisions about placements are always made in the best interest. So one of the things with adoption is that sometimes it's quite difficult to place children locally to where they've grown up, to give them the best start and to kind of make sure that they're able to kind of start those, build those attachments. And for parents, I think, you know, birth parents, it'd be very difficult if they're kind of living very locally to where they're adopted. So one of the advantages of being part of the Adopt East Alliance is that we're able to kind of utilize placements within that alliance. So, for example, we've used placements in Suffolk, in Norfolk, and vice versa. Some of the agencies within the Adopt East Alliance have used some of our adopters as well. It means that we can make matches without unnecessary delay. It means that also we're less likely to have to use independent agencies for adoption, and that we can kind of utilize training across the region, so that we're sharing our resources. Within the report, there's a link to the Adopt East website that people can link into. The service is doing really well. We're recruiting adopters. We've seen through COVID initially that there was a decrease in terms of the numbers of adopters that were coming forward, I think, because with the uncertainty. But as we've moved, I think, to past sort of a little way through the COVID crisis, that we're now starting to get people coming forward and wanting to be assessed. Those are the main changes, really, is that this is a new service in the last year or so. And our numbers in terms of adoption over the last couple of years have doubled. This is a small authority. We don't have a large amount of children who are adopted. And so what we want to do is make sure for those children where the plan is adoption, that we find placements in a timely way and that they're able to move on and settle in with their adoptive parents. So that's probably a summary of what we do in the adoption service. So unless anybody's got any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions, obviously.
Thank you very much again, Janet. Yes, would anyone like to ask anything, please?
Later.
Councillor Edsall.
Thanks a lot. Can you hear me fine? Just to say to Janet, does that mean it's in-house? Adoption is come back in-house?
Yes.
Yeah, because it used to be years ago, didn't it? And I was on the adoption panel, so it's good to see that it's just something good to come back to the Thurrock. It's good. Thank you, Janet. Cheers.
Right, I can't see any more hands, so if members are okay, we'll go to agreeing the recommendation on page 57, if everyone's in agreement.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Excellent, thank you. So, right, we now move to item 8, which is the Children in Care Council update. So please may I ask of an officer to introduce that report, please.
Yeah, hi, my name's Annie and I work with the Children in Care Council. The Chair and Vice Chair have asked me to present the report and then we ask for any questions that you have to be maybe put to Christopher or Ralph. We've continued to have, it's just the update, we continue to have our meetings on Zoom through the through these difficult times, which have been quite successful, and we've welcomed many guests over the last year, including the inspectors who came to visit and took a report back. CICC in general are open to attending meetings, or would like to invite anybody who'd like to come and visit one of our meetings. It's not a closed meeting. We invite you to come along and get a gist of what we do. We've discussed many topics, and at the moment the young people place quite a high importance on actually being part of the Children in Care Council, and they'd like to widen the scope to include lots more young people, and especially now with embraced Zoom, we can actually maybe have people from a lot further afield where we haven't been able to before. We'd like to look for lots of new members if we could, even if they're actually attending on Zoom. So, but we've had a good year and we look forward to another good year next year. If there's any questions, I'd like to go to Rap or Chris.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So any questions, please put your hand up.
Chair, Councillor Redsell's got a hand up.
Yeah, sorry, Chair.
Councillor Redsell. I can't see your...
I don't think the little hand is working sometimes. Just to ask Annie, do you invite the members to join? You know, there might be some things the youngsters want to ask us, you know, as members of corporate parenting. Is that something you would see to do?
Yeah, we do feedback to them. In fact, our next meeting is on Thursday, and any questions that they have, or if there's anything they need to ask in particular, we tend to try and field it through the chair or the vice chair. But if anybody really wanted to come on and have a say, then we would welcome that, and we would actually ask permission of the members of the Corporate Parenting Committee if that could be done.
Thank you.
Sorry, again, the raising hand symbol isn't on here again. I just wanted to say, yeah, that the more people we have and the more people that can give us feedback, you know, the more, you know, members in CICC can contribute to any problems or any issues. So it, you know, it always helps for other people to join in, so then we have different viewpoints as well. And that was it, really. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, sorry, my raise your hand thing isn't here either. But yeah, even in the last meeting, we spent the majority of the last meeting just discussing the inspection we had at Ofsted. And just like we did with that, we'd pretty much do the same thing if one of you would want to come and just discuss any issues that were brought up during one of these meetings, and then we'd then take the same approach. And then anything that you guys say, we'll then feed it back to the rest of the group, and then obviously we'll try to work something out through a report and feed it back to you guys that way.
very much. I can see that Councillor Johnson's got his hand up, so please go ahead.
Thank you. Raphael, there's 9 cabinet members of the council who each have a specific portfolio, which I have visited with the previous Children in Care Council before, and would be quite willing to do it again. But if there is a specific issue, as you said, I deal with housing, there are people who deal with certain things. There's nothing stopping you approaching a cabinet member and asking them to attend. As I said, if they know they're attending for something they're talking about in their own portfolio, I found it a very worthwhile experience when I did it. So have a think about what you specifically want to talk about. Have a look at the 9 cabinet members and see what they are in charge of, and then get one of them in.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Fair point. But there was something that was brought up in one of our meetings recently, and I feel like I think it was brought up in the last corporate parenting meeting where we were talking about the initial health assessments and the time period that it takes for us to have those initial health assessments. And I know that there were a lot of concerns when I spoke to a few people within the group just about their personal experiences, and even in mine, like correct me if I'm wrong, but what I understood was there was meant to be a 28-day period for us, like upon us coming into care, for us to have those initial health assessments. But for me, it ended up being about 2-3 months before I ended up having that, and it was really frustrating, at least for me, because I came from a situation where, sleeping rough, and in that situation, obviously it makes you paranoid, and you end up thinking you have things that you don't, and then during that time, because it was such a long time that I was in that situation, after coming into care, all I wanted to do was to get checked out to, put my mind to ease. But obviously no one even presented the opportunity for me to be able to get that sort of help. And then obviously in the last corporate parenting meeting, I come to find out that there's this 28-day period in which these things are meant to be sorted. But for me, at least, it took about 2-3 months for someone to be like, oh, he needs to get checked.
Thank you. I think Sheila Murphy wants to speak, please.
Thank you. I mean, just answering sort of straight from Raphael's last point, I think that will be covered in the report on initial health assessments, and it's something that both council and health have been working really hard on and have actually improved, which is good for children coming in now. Doesn't negate your experience, but is good for children coming in now. I think what I wanted to say was, it's really important for all of us that we hear your voice, the Children in Care Council. And if you have, I don't know if you have a sort of a set work plan about sorts of things you want to talk about. If you have, if you could share that with us, then we could maybe suggest to you, there are some people who could come and talk to you about those issues. It could be anything. I don't know what your work plan would be, but then that way we can make sure we get the right people in for you to ask questions of as well. So it's not just people talking to you, but for you as, young people who've either been in care or just left care, to actually have the right people in front of you to say, well, this was my experience. Is it meant to be like that? What are you doing to help us? What more can you do? What can we do to help other young people in the same circumstances? So I think you'd get a lot of positive responses from a lot of officers across, not just in the council, but in other services as well, if it would be helpful. And if you let us know the sorts of areas you are interested in, then we can try and get the right people to speak to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think Councillor Lydiard, please.
Oh, yes, thanks. I was thinking maybe we should do it the other way round. I mean, Councillor Johnson mentioned the portfolio holders. What about if we asked a couple of portfolio holders every meeting to actually go to the Children Care Council and explain what their responsibilities are and how they could interact with the young people, because I've been doing a bit of a straw poll, and there's, well, virtually so few people, so few children who actually know their counsellors or know what the council actually does. And very few counsellors really engage with corporate parenting, don't they? To be perfectly honest.
Chair, could I come in?
Yes, of course.
Sorry,
Yes.
my hand's not working. And just to pick up on what Councillor Johnson said and Councillor Lydiard, we've had this before, haven't we, where it's right what Councillor Johnson said, you've got portfolio holders who have got specific things under their belt that they deal with, but there are 49 councillors who all sit on committees to do with health, to do with education, you know, housing, everything. So I think it's to find out who we are first of all, and if there's specific questions you want to ask, use, you know, Tila knows how I feel about most of these things, but you've got to use us. You've got us, you know, to ask questions. And if you're sitting in a meeting and you haven't got the answers, it's not very good for you. You need to have somebody there who can answer a question, you know, which you want. So, and as Councillor Lydiard said, not many councillors know what corporate parenting is all about. And I think we've plugged it before. We need to open this up, you know, because we're here to help you. That's what we're for. Thank you, Lizzie. Cheers.
Thank you. Yeah.
Apologies, I haven't got a hand. It's Jane Foster Taylor.
I think there is a hand up, isn't there?
One of the questions that I was going to ask, probably under AOB, but it fits in probably really well now with Raphael's point, is obviously when I'm not a regular member and I'm supporting a member of staff that's away today, and I'll be delivering their paper. But one of the things I was going to ask of Sheila was, I wasn't quite sure where corporate parenting fits in the pecking order if we were looking at the governance terms. And so I was trying to work out, and I've written myself up, because on the membership I noticed it didn't have health as a regular attender, or public health, who is the provider of the review health assessments. CCG is obviously the initial health assessments, and we have providers, and I didn't know where it sat in the line of governance. Probably I need to look at the terms of reference, but does corporate parenting fit and go into SEND, or does it go into Brighter Futures, which goes into SEND? Because I know there's been escalation items from this agenda, which are also sitting at Health and Wellbeing Board, and I didn't know how it, and maybe it's a question, Sheila, you could answer, where incrementally, if there was escalations, where corporate parenting fits, because I couldn't describe it today when I read the papers and when I was thinking about it.
The chair's happy. I'll respond to that.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Corporate parenting committees sits, if you like, on its own outside of those structures, precisely for the reason that this is the committee of, and the corporate parenting bit is for councillors to exercise their corporate parenting responsibility towards looked after children, and so they should be free to go wherever they feel they need to go. So if this committee picked up something that they felt was really serious, they would raise it, you know, at cabinet, at full council, at Health and Wellbeing Board, at the LSCP. So wherever we felt we needed to take something, I think that the committee may well benefit from having standing members from other disciplines outside of the council, because of course you have corporate parenting responsibilities as well to looked after children, you know. So although the council is the lead, actually we're not the only agency. So it may be you know, that we may want to look at the terms of reference, and if we have got someone, you know, from health able to come regularly, I think that would assist us a lot, because there's quite often issues raised about health and well-being, you know, that's really important for both children in care and care leavers. So if there were an offer there, I suspect the committee would probably want to consider that and may well come back to you quite quickly on that.
Thank you, Sheila.
Thank you. Yes, Anne Guidotti, please.
Thank you. I was just wondering if there's a list of councillors and what their specific interests are, or whatever. Maybe we could have emailed to us so we can invite people sporadically to various meetings, and so as we know exactly what their specific interest is.
Thank you. There are, oh, sorry, Ken was going to say, but there is on the website with the list of councillors, you can see what committees each one's on and if they've got a cabinet position. But I don't know, I'm sure Kenna could maybe put something together that's a bit easier to read or access, maybe.
Yes, yeah, that's fine. I'll make a note of that. I can email something over.
Thank you. That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Councillor Edsall?
No, I'm fine.
Okay, you came up.
I'm being quiet.
Okay. Oh, right, that's great. So thank you very much, everyone. So if everyone's finished with questions, if we're okay to go to the recommendation on page 77, are all members in agreement, please?
Great.
Agreed.
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 We'll go on to 9, which is the initial health assessments, and please may I ask an officer to introduce the report.
Hello, it's Janet Simon again. So this report, so I've been presenting a report at I think the last 3 corporate parenting committees around initial health assessments. So I won't go into all the background again, but essentially we know there's been an issue in terms of our ability to complete timely initial health assessments for our looked after children. So when Ofsted came in November, they acknowledged that we'd made some changes and that we were starting to kind of, but the change was the pace of change was too slow. So, sorry, I thought somebody said something. So when a child comes into care, as Raphael and I think Chris mentioned in the last corporate care parenting committee, 28 days, they're supposed to have a initial health assessment completed within 28 days of coming into care. So within 20 working days, but within 28 full days. And so we, as a local authority, make a referral within 5 working days of a young person coming into care to our health colleagues. And then they let us know when the health assessment is going to take place. And then hopefully the assessment's done within 28 days. I suppose one of the things I need to acknowledge here is that when an initial health assessment takes place, it doesn't count as being done for the local authority purposes until we get the health paperwork back, which is why when we report and we report on the performance, we tend to report a month in arrears to give health an opportunity to get the paperwork back to us. Because obviously if a health assessment's done on the last day of the month, they're not going to get the paperwork back to us on the last day of the month. So it would be unfair to then say, well, they're out of time scale. So we know that there's been an issue and we've kind of put lots of things in place. There've been lots of meetings with health. We have a weekly meeting each week to look at health assessments, both review and initial health assessments, to look at any blockages in place, to look at solutions around how we're going to improve the performance in terms of initial health assessments. So the process for initial health assessments was initially complicated and we've streamlined the paperwork. And we've done that with our health colleagues, you know, to sort of make sure that it meets the needs of everybody. We've included the consent for initial health assessments with our looked after paperwork. So when we ask parents to sign section 20, for example, to agree for their child to be looked after, we ask them to sign the paperwork for initial health assessments to take place. So as I said, we have a weekly meeting involving health and social care to discuss the data and any outstanding assessments. Our data team, sort of Mandy Moore's team, has developed reports that are updated each day and are live, which help us to identify where the child is in the IHA journey from the date they become looked after. So our data at the moment will tell us the date they became looked after. It will tell us when the referral was made to health, when the initial health assessment has taken place. So it kind of gives us the journey for that child in terms of where they are. We know that our health colleague, we're having discussions with our health colleagues around a central database. That was put on hold during COVID, but there's been a meeting more recently, and I'm sure Jane Foster-Taylor will be able to maybe talk a little bit more about that. One of the issues around consent for initial health assessments is that in order for us to make a referral to our health colleagues for children who are accommodated under section 20, so that's with parents' consent, we have to have the parents' consent, written consent to the young person having an initial health assessment. Sometimes there's a difficulty, so we don't have any overriding powers for children who are accommodated voluntarily. So if a parent doesn't sign consent for the health assessment, then health hands are tied and so are ours. Where a child is subject to an interim care order, then we're able to give consent on behalf of the child. So the report sets out what some of the issues have been and some of the actions that we've taken. So we've got a clear escalation process in place where delays identified. So if we haven't made a referral, then health will escalate because they will know when a child comes into care and they'll let us know that they're waiting for the health paperwork to come through. If we are waiting for a health assessment to be arranged, then there's also an escalation process back to health to kind of say, look, we're waiting for this. The process for receipt and upload of the reports once the assessment is completed is being tracked. And more recently, health have been spot purchasing IHAs for young people where they've struggled to meet the need. This report, as I said, sets out the actions that we've taken. At the end of the report, there are some appendices which show our performance over the last year, the numbers of initial health assessments. It shows the numbers of initial health assessments that are completed within 20 working days. And what we can see is the performance as over time, it's kind of gone up and it's gone down. But more recently, what we can see is that there was a drop in April and May, and we think that was due to COVID and the impact of that. And then we can see an improvement in June. I've got some up-to-date data which tells us a little bit more. So as of today on our dashboard, what we can see is that in terms of completed initial health assessments in June, we had 100% of referrals were made in timescale. In July, 53.3%. We know that, and then we've got 35 initial health assessment, the referrals weren't made in time. And some of those are based around children who are section 20, where we've struggled to get permission from parents in order to arrange initial health assessments. In terms of completed initial health assessments in and out of timescale, what we can see is that because the data is behind, is that we can now see that the initial health assessments in time for June is sitting at 75%. For July, it's not looking as good so far, but that could be a lag where we're waiting for some of the paperwork to come through. So at the moment it's sitting at 33.3%, but I would anticipate by the end of this month, when we've got the paperwork in, that we'll start to see those numbers rising. So unless people have got I don't know if anybody's got any additional questions, if there's anything I haven't answered. It may be that you want to hear from health before you ask those questions. I don't know.
Yes, thank you very much, Janet. That's definitely a good example of where it needs to be linked in with the health committee, really, doesn't it? So as you say, it's quite linked in there. Thank you. Would anyone like to ask any questions?
No.
Okay. Oh, we've got Sheila Murphy, I think, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered, because we have got health colleagues here, and I think they were going to co-present that report, if there was anything our health colleagues would like to add.
It probably would be helpful if we did our report and then we picked up, because we've got some slight, we've got similar but different points to raise probably on the process. So would it be helpful to run them both and then see where we land? I think on reflection, it's probably a report that you'd want health to do for you, Janet, in future. And certainly with the SEND, we've got the KPIs and we've got the data where we're collecting. So I think we'll get better at that. But Chair, if you want me, I can continue and then we can pick up questions collectively, both Janet and I.
Okay. Thank you. So are there any further comments at all?
No.
Okay, so we'll go on to, are we okay for members to approve the recommendation? Page 85.
Agreed.
Please.
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay, lovely.
Agreed.
Thank you. So we now move on to item 10, which is the Looked After Children Health Report. And please may I ask an officer to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, I will deliver this on behalf of my team. I'm Jane Foster-Taylor. I'm the Chief Nurse for Thurrock Clinical Commissioning Group. If I may, if I could just ask Michael, who's our new Looked After Children Nurse for Thurrock, to put on his camera just for a second so that people can see him and he can wave to people. He's shy. So Michael, put on your camera for a second so everybody knows who you are.
Hello, my name is Michael. I am the interim developmental role for designated nurse LAC for Thurrock, and I contributed to this report, but Jane is delivering it because it's my first time here.
So Michael will be your go-to person, and he's going to be your everything and part of our everything for Looked After Children. So thank you, Michael, for that. I think before I start the report, firstly, an apology for Raphael, not good enough that we didn't manage to deliver your KPI for IHA. So apologies for that, and we will do better. I think if I take the point, the paper, I'm probably going to take it as read, but with a couple of points that I want to bring through. So initial health assessments are commissioned through commissioners, through Thurrock Clinical Commissioning Group, delivered, and our delivery agent is the paediatricians through NEL. And our review health assessments are delivered through your public health team, and that's a different service, but again delivered through NELFT. And I think maybe when we go forward, if we have an opportunity to look at the membership, I'd love to see public health and I'd love to see CCG, which would be Michael, here, because then you've got both sides of we've got all sides of the triangle, and then Janet, which is from social care and a provider. So if we have an opportunity to change the membership, I think I'd love that. I think we've not been great for many years doing IHAs in a timely manner. And if you look at the SEND data for both Southend, for Essex County Council, and also for us, we just need to do better. We need to be delivering in the 28 days. We need to be notified early. We need to get good paperwork to us, and we need to make sure it happens. There isn't a problem with us. We've got the paediatricians. We do pretty well. I take Sheila's point, which she mentioned earlier on, that we have most of our people, if they're placed out of area, within 20 miles. but there are complexities within that. And if you look at the Essex safeguarding footprint, and I think Thurrock, whilst we are Team Thurrock, we are more than just Team Thurrock. The Essex footprint is complicated, and if you look at the boundaries, if you go 5 miles into Basildon, you will get different providers that have to deliver the initial health assessments and the review health assessments, and that makes it really difficult. So what we've got, and within the body of the report, are a couple of things that we're looking at. So our children's commissioners are looking at could we have one provider for initial health assessments? Could a nurse be upskilled to do the role? Yeah, at the moment, the answer is no, but it doesn't mean to say that we can't do that going forward, and it's something that we're managing nationally. One of the things that we've had this year that has been difficult is we have had, and everybody knows this, we've had COVID, and it has impacted on our numbers, and I'd be very surprised if June, July and August data is not great. And of course, we might yet get a second wave of COVID. So that's meant for us, we've had paediatricians have been redeployed, we've had nurses that have been redeployed, and we have had impacts on both the initial health assessments and the review health assessments and our effectiveness. Not good enough, but it's happened, and our staff, as of the 1st of September, all the staff that have been redeployed, we've asked for them to be returned to centres so they come back and they can do the day job, and we're hoping that happens. If we have a COVID second wave, I dare say the impact will happen again, but that's not productive for us. One of the problems that we've got within Essex is we're not very good at track and tracing and keeping an eye on the dates of when the IHAs need. So if they're in Thurrock and we've got the Thurrock provider, it's fine. If we've got somebody that's Thurrock, that's Southend, or it's Essex County Council, it's difficult. So one of the things that the Safeguarding Clinical Network Board, and we'll bring a paper to our Safeguarding Board and also to the SEND report board, is we're looking at an IT digital solution where we can track and trace everybody and we have a better grip on where people are. That means it makes it easier for us to get consent, for sorting out the paperwork, for making sure that we get all the initial health assessments or review health assessments done within the Essex boundaries, and that is certainly something that we need to do, which covers probably the points on 101 and 102. We have had complexities within the system, but that doesn't mean that we don't need to do better, and we will do better. I think some of the issues that we've picked up within our paper, which is probably slightly different from the social care paper, is that NELFT have reviewed and they've done a bit of an audit on when they've got the paper, and they've said whilst they've had notification, they haven't had full documentation, or they haven't been able to progress the paperwork. And I think as a SEND board, maybe I think it would be really great if we have a bit of a mini audit on whether the documentation we get is sufficient, that we can progress what we need to progress. So I think there's a little bit of work that I think we could take through some of the subgroups of this, if that's okay, so we can have a look at the quality of the paperwork, whether it's right and how we do. The data reconciliation and the reporting is definitely something that we've talked about, and capturing that data is something that we need to do. One of the things that we did with the Children in Care Council, and it was probably 2 years ago, is we had a passport for Children in Care Council that was owned by the Children in Care Council, designed by the Children in Care Council, which meant that it was helpful tracking your health needs within the system. Our children's commissioners and Michael's previous incumbent have been doing a piece of work with the Children in Care Council looking at that, and actually it's dated already and it's not strong enough for mental health work. So there's a piece of work that will be happening about, is there an opportunity that we redesign that passport? And I absolutely think there is. There are I think what we have now got with the Brighter Futures Board and with the SEND board and with the partnership is, I think we've got the opportunity now to do things better. I think we've got better at data reporting, and taking COVID out of the window, I think we've got an opportunity to make it much better. And I think if we plug the right people into all of the subgroups and all of the sub meetings, I think we can make it better, and we will make it better. For the data which we've got, which we obviously take to send, and I think we just need to we need to invest and make sure that it's stronger. But we also need to recognise that there are different people that do different bits of the jigsaw. When we just on a different point, for anybody that is placed outside of Thurrock and isn't in the Essex footprint, because we have a bit of a mutual aid system, so we'll do anybody's initial health assessment or review health assessment within Essex. But if they're outside of Essex, then and we bring people back into Essex, we will pay. That's not a problem about us commissioning or paying for either the review. We can spot purchase, and we will do that. The difficulty is having the right people with the right skill sets to do that piece of work, but that is something we're definitely working on. So I think for us, I think there's a piece of work that we could audit and maybe look at some cases that went well and some cases that didn't go well, and see if we can embed that. I think the prioritising what we do in Thurrock is complicated, and I think when we look at the numbers and we look at the numbers of UASC that we've got, that are the unaccompanied asylum seekers, and the impact that's having on our system, we need to have a look at the numbers, because when we look at some mutual aid, which we would normally expect with some of our providers in Barkinghaven and Redbridge or in Kent, they are now saying to us, we haven't got capacity to provide either support with review or initial health assessments, which means we have no other alternative other than to bring back to Thurrock. So I think we've got a little bit more work to do to make it tight and to make it better. But anyway, I'll take the rest of the report as read, but I'm happy to pick up any questions.
Thank you very much. Would anyone like to ask anything, please? Okay, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. Thanks for the report. Can I just refer you to what's called the LAC report? Under significant risks, it says the CCGs and the local authorities are not fulfilling their corporate parenting responsibilities, and the CCGs are not compliant with statutory requirements. That's not a risk, is it? That's a failure. Well, is that right across the Essex board you're looking at, or is that specifically for Thurrock?
No, it's I would say it's probably nationally. So if you look at all of the and it's where does the risk sit, which is why we want to audit. So if you look at the data that we had Janet produced and local authority produced, and then you look at the audit that NELF did, NELF would dispute that they've had timely good handovers. And so we need to do a piece of work where we have a look as a system and say, how do we make it better? But you're absolutely right. It's I suppose they pick it up as a reputational risk, and it is something that we need to do better. But we also but it isn't just one provider that owns that risk. We need to have a look and think. If we look at Thurrock and we think 2/3 of people are placed outside, those that are in Thurrock are likely to get timely assessments. Those that aren't, don't. When you look at issues around consent, or you look at issues around coming into area, or you look at issues around translation services, there are complexities that are not just down to one provider. And so it's the system that owns those risks. But yes, we need to do better. We definitely need to do better. I mean, we have the money's not an issue. The funding's not an issue. COVID was an issue when we redeployed staff. But we collectively need to work out how we work smarter as a system to make sure that we have a more successful, timely assessment for both initial and review health assessments. And we are capturing the data. So what we couldn't do maybe two years ago, and we can under Sheila's SEND board, is we can describe where the issues are, and we just need to get better at plugging those gaps.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Lydiard.
As a foster carer, as well as a counsellor, I find the health assessments done by so many different people with some duplication, and I wonder whether the whole process ought to be streamlined. I don't know whether Jenny and Sharon have had a different experience. I'd be pleased to hear from them as well.
Yes, I found they used to run a lot better when we had a paediatrician who was specifically working with looked after children. Once the decision was made to move her on and to spread the load across the board, it seemed to change dramatically from there. And I think that's probably one of the issues, that there isn't really an identified person who understands looked after children, understands the issues around that is just dealing with the young people. And obviously there's also the problems we have as carers of also sometimes fitting it in those 15 days that we're supposed to be doing it with, because we've had like calls where you've been told it's booked for this day and you've got to come, whatever. And unfortunately, sometimes we have to say we actually have something else for another young person at that time. We can't, you can't always prioritise. We try our best to make sure we do, but sometimes it isn't always possible.
Thank you. Sheila Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. Jane, you mentioned obviously with COVID that health staff were moved into doing different duties. And I know we have discussed this in other meetings, but I suppose I'm just making a plea again that if there is another COVID surge or whatever happens, that we have to say that the health needs of children are really important, and as much as we can, we should try and have some resource left to actually do the important work of these health assessments. And I suppose if there's anything we can do to support that for you and other colleagues in health, then if you let us know what that is.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that, Sheila. I think as a backdrop for people that didn't understand it, that when we opened Brentwood Community Hospital and we opened the additional 125 beds that we needed for COVID as an out of hospital response, it was championed and set up by NELFT, who is our community provider. And so for Southwest Essex, particularly for Basildon and Thurrock, the impact, even though it was a system, it supported Mid-Essex, Southeast Essex and Thurrock, the impact was felt more in the Southwest because we used our community staff that our provider as NELFT. So it will have impacted on both the review and the initial health assessments. We fought tirelessly, and nationally the reset work, we're at reset 3, is that NELFT has now sent the provider staff back to their day job. But we lost children's occupational therapists, speech therapists, school nurses, health visiting, who were redeployed to that as a centre, and it will have impacted on our ability to be able to deliver, or for our providers to deliver, because there's more than one provider. It will have had an impact on the agenda for looked after children, and we've had the assurance, and we've fought hard through various subcommittees with Sheila that all staff are returned. And I think, again, that might be another reason why I think it would be an opportunity just to look at the terms of reference, so that you have, because I do a little bit of the puzzle, but other people do little bits of the puzzle, and it would be good to have the NELFT impact and public health that also commission the review health assessments as part of your spokes vehicle, to provide, and also to get assurance from them that they're championing the cause as well. But I'm confident we will have everybody back, but there will be a backlog now.
Thank you. Anne, please.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I've muted myself. Just to say that you mentioned the health passport. if you would like to have a consult with the CICC, we have a meeting on Thursday, but bear in mind our meetings are monthly and for an hour and a half. So if you would like to sort of have someone consult with us, by all means, I can send you our email address, or you can maybe get that from Kenna.
So we'd welcome that. I think it's Helen Farmer and Louise Warren who have been doing that piece of work. I do believe they've been working with our comms team, Louise Banks, to do that piece of work. And I hope I'm assuming it's the Children in Care Council that they've been working with, but I could be wrong. Certainly they have been consulting, and I would need to just confirm who that is. And maybe Michael, you can pick that up as an action for tomorrow, so that because I'm in meetings in the morning. But it was certainly feedback from the engagement that said actually it's slightly out of date, and it should have more details on support for mental health services. So certainly it's going to have a bit of a rewrite, but it would be absolutely appropriate that it came back to the Children and Care Council to make sure that it's suitable before we reprint the document. So no, I'd welcome that, Annie. That would be great. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Are there any further questions or comments at all? Okay, so if we're all right for members to approve the recommendation on page 95, please.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Lovely. So we'll now move to item 11, which is the corporate parenting strategy. Please may an officer introduce the report.
Okay, it's Janet Simon. I'm going to be introducing this report. This is the corporate parenting strategy, which informs members of their responsibilities as corporate parents and what work is being done to fulfill this. So in terms of the covering report, kind of sets out really the sort of what is broadly understood by corporate parenting in relation to how local authorities should approach their responsibilities, and that, you know, it should be about children being cared about as well as looked after. It talks about the Children and Social Work Act 2017, which introduces corporate parenting principles, which comprises of 7 needs that the local authority in England, local authorities in England must have regards to whenever they exercise their functions in relation to children looked after or care leavers. The principles are intended to secure a better approach to fulfilling functions in relation to looked after children, and to, as far as where is possible, to facilitate secure, nurturing and positive experiences for our looked after children and young people that will enable them to have hopefully positive outcomes. So the report goes on to talk about the responsibilities, as I've said. It sets out in terms of the purpose of the report, it talks about the specific requirements in terms of the principles that we should have to act in the best interest of children, to encourage children and young people to express their views, to encourage and provide the local authority and its relevant partners to participate in corporate parenting, for young people to be safe and stable in their homes, to look at relationships, education, work opportunities, and to make sure we're preparing our young people for adulthood. So in order for us to be effective corporate parents, then we need to be committed from all council employees and elected members and our partners, so that, as Jane was saying earlier, around health and making sure that we're including partners in our corporate parenting. So the corporate parenting committee should be an opportunity for members to scrutinise and challenge officers of the council in terms of the work we're doing and how we're improving outcomes for children and young people. The strategy provides some focus and direction for the work of our work with looked after children and care leavers, and it talks about our aspirations for them. The strategy is directly linked to the looked after and care leavers strategy, which was presented to the committee last year, and an essential part of getting it right in Thurrock is to develop counsellors' understanding of their roles and responsibilities as corporate parents. And I know that we've done some training last year. We need to put some more training in place for counsellors who've not been able to kind of go on that training, so they're really clear about their role and responsibilities. So the fundamental aim of the strategy is to ensure that counsellors understand their roles, scrutinise and challenge, engage effectively, support children and young people, and understand that children and young people can hold them to account. It sets out our commitments and what we want to do in terms of what it means to be an excellent corporate parent. And then it goes on to talk about some of our key priorities and how these outcomes will be measured. So it talks about how many UASC children we have. It talks about how many children we've got in the care system currently in Thurrock. And then we go on to the key priorities. So our key priorities are for children to remain cared for in their family where it's safe to do so. So wherever possible, we'll work to keep children in families and reduce our looked after children numbers, because we recognise that if it's at all possible, that's the best place for children to be. So for our Families Together team to successfully work with children and young people who are on the edge of care, for our young people who are in foster placements, that they are able to stay there until they're ready to leave and they feel prepared to live independently, that young people will say that they feel cared for and supported in their placement and they're happy with the service that they're offered. That we involve children and young people in the decisions that will affect their lives and maximise the opportunity to make choices. And that's really important in terms of young people and children attending the Corporate Care Parenting Committee, but the Children in Care Council, and making sure that we're listening and we're enabling young people to be involved in the decisions. And so things like kind of involving young people in developing things like the health passports. We involved our young people last year in developing our offer to care leavers. So making sure that we're narrowing the educational and attainment gap between LAC, our looked after children cohort, and their non-children looked after peers. To make sure that our looked after children and our care leavers know what their rights and entitlements are, and that this is really transparent, that they know where to get that, and it's easy to understand. And that we hopefully get good outcomes for our children through placement stability. And that as we've discussed earlier, that young people's health needs being assessed, that they have up-to-date immunisations, dental care, developmental checks where required. And of course, increase our number of in-house foster placements who are well supported. And we know that we can sustain placements and make them stable if foster placements are well supported to meet the needs of our children and young people, including young people with complex needs, sibling groups, unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. So Appendix 1 sets out the corporate parenting defined responsibilities. And then the next appendix is the terms of reference that we currently have in terms of the Corporate Parenting Committee. And then there's a corporate parenting engagement plan, which sets out some of the objectives and actions that we will take over the next year or so. So if anybody's got any questions for me that they'd like me to answer, they'll be welcome.
Thank you very much yet again. I think Councillor Lydiard, please.
Yes, I see that under consultation, that we haven't done any consultation on corporate parenting. And I think the point I made earlier about counsellors not really sort of understanding their role is pretty relevant. from the sort of questions I've asked from people, of counsellors and foster carers, and some of the looked after children, they don't really know what their responsibilities are, the counsellors that is. And I wonder, should we do some consultation with members to find out what they do know, so that the training that we put on meets the needs of the local authority and looked after children?
Yeah, I mean, it would be useful to kind of know what counsellors understand about their responsibilities. Within one of the things I've said is that obviously the strategy needs to be shared with all members so that they are fully aware of their responsibilities, but that we need to roll out training as we did last year. So we had a number of counsellors, Sheila Murphy and myself delivered training to a number of counsellors, but it's kind of getting counsellors involved who wouldn't normally see this as maybe an area, a priority for them. Because I think there are obviously there are counsellors where, you know, if your responsibilities around housing, children, then I think there are some counsellors who may not understand the full responsibility. So I think it is about rolling out training, giving people the opportunity to ask questions, and maybe kind of repeating that stuff and kind of maybe doing specific areas. So maybe looking at care leavers, looking at children looked after, looking at fostering, and maybe trying to focus it a little bit more for members.
Yeah, and most foster carers don't know the counsellors either. So that sort of communication between foster carers and counsellors probably isn't happening. Although, you know, the report is a very good report, from a counsellor point of view, I don't think it's really working as it should be.
Okay.
Can I come in, Chair?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Edson.
Sorry, I haven't got the little hand. It's gone off my screen for some reason. I mean, not actually a question. I agree with Councillor Lydiard, what he said. We've tried this so often, haven't we, Sheila? We've tried to get members involved because they are all corporate parents. You know, it's like sometimes banging your head against a brick wall sometimes. But I think just to give a little bit praise, Chair, where it's due, when this committee started, which was years ago, we weren't anywhere then, really. We've moved, and you've got to praise members and officers of where we've come, because we've come a long way. You know, this is, I don't know if Sheila agrees with me, but we have come and done an awful lot to push corporate parenting, and we wouldn't be where we are now if it wasn't for that. So I think you've got to give yourself a little bit of praise. This committee has moved on, you know, it has got. But I agree with Councillor Lydiard. We have got to get, because they all, if something goes wrong in this authority and something happens to a child, we are all responsible, you know. So I think that has to be pulled home, and we have tried it so often. But I think Janet's right. We've got to have more training, and perhaps both leaders have got to get on it to push their members to go, because actually it's quite interesting, you know, to see it. But Lizzie, sorry to bang on, but I think it's just, we need to get to members, you know, to take this very seriously, because it is serious. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lydiard, do you want to come in again there?
Yes, please. Yeah. I wasn't so much criticising what's gone on, as Councillor Redstall says. There's been a huge improvement in corporate parenting.
Yeah.
But today, you know, in today's environment, there's lots of ways of communicating with and between people. For example, videos online and stuff like that. We have a tremendous system, you know, with our phones, and you can very easily these days prepare sort of short sound bites and send them to every counsellor to say, do you know what corporate parenting is? you don't have to wait for them to come to a training session, because we all know that, you know, if you invite 49, you'll be lucky to get 5 turn up, because they don't see it as their real interest. It's not highly political. They don't know necessarily how much the service costs, how many kids we've got in care. There's lots of new communication methods that we can use to get to counsellors, to get to our looked after children, to get to our foster carers, to inform them without actually inviting 49 counsellors in, or, you know, 100 foster carers, or, you know, 200 kids. There's other ways of doing it, and I think for the future we should look into that and ask our communications team, you know, how can we do that? Because, you know, I sat here this week, 150 pages of agenda. I think to read it and to understand it was on and off for 2 days. Whereas sometimes a soundbite on your phone that comes up, you know, you're gonna listen to it, and it could be a lot easier, a lot more effective. I don't know what others think on that subject, but let me know.
Can I come back, Chair? Is it all right?
Yeah, yes.
Thank you. Thanks to Steve. Yeah, I do agree. There was a little something put out a few weeks ago from education, from schools, taking children through going back to school. I think that's the sort of thing we could do with corporate parenting. Steve's right. A little thing to bring up, a little video of what happens on the committee and how it works is a good thing. You know, something we can all visually see quickly. So I think that's a good idea. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. I think Janet, do you want to come in?
It was just to say, as well as delivering training, we also sent out a PowerPoint, which was fairly easy to follow. I think it was only about 6 pages, which just set out what corporate parenting meant. But I take on board what you're saying, Steve, that we could probably, Councillor Lydiard, that we could probably produce something which maybe just sets out some basic figures and some details that would kind of just maybe help people to understand how many children are in care, how many children are leaving care, and those sorts of things. So that might be also something we could do as well. We could kind of maybe update that PowerPoint and redistribute it to all members.
Thank you very much. Some good points there. Is there anything else, or are members okay to move to the recommendation on page 113?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, so we'll now move to item number 12, which is the Corporate Parenting Committee Annual Report 2019-2020. Please may the officer present.
Thank you, Chair. This is one coming from Democratic Services. I'll only do a brief talk through it because, you know, I'm guessing members have read it, and obviously we've got Councillor Redser with us this evening, who's the previous chair. It was decided back at a members' training session in 2019 by the leader that a report be produced on corporate parenting similar to the one that is done for our overview and scrutiny committees, which basically gives an overview of the year's previous work. So obviously that came through and it was completed last year. We've completed it again for this year, and you'll see through the main report itself, which is attached as the appendix, it basically gives a brief overview of what corporate parenting is. You know, the fact, as has been mentioned this evening, that all members are corporate parents, who the membership is, you know, what makes corporate parenting effective, and then there is an overview of the previous year. if members are happy with it, we will send this off to full council so that all members can see what happened last year. And obviously we can also get that agreed there. Councillor Roster, I don't know if there's obviously more information you would like to include there, obviously from last year that the committee overtook.
Through you, Chair, I think it's a good report. We need to bang away to make sure that members do understand, you know, what corporate parenting means. But I think, you know, it's something will come up at full council again, I'm sure. But I've got nothing to add. I think we've done a good job over the years and bringing things to the fore, you know, and children are better looked after in care than ever, I think, because we're bringing up all the things, perhaps, you know, in some cases where it's wrong, we've adhered to that and we've made them better. So I think, you know, good to you all for all the work you've done for the years anyway. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kenna, for that, and thank you, Councillor Redsall. So if there are no further comments, we'll move to recommendations on page 135, recommendation 1.1 and 1.2. Are all members in agreement?
Great.
Okay, lovely. So it's now just the work programme. So are there any comments or anything on the work programme coming forward? I can see Councillor Lydiard.
Following on from what we said earlier, I think it's really important that we get our communications team to look at how we communicate with councillors. We see absolutely reams of paper, and we tend to get a bit sort of blasé with 150-page, you know, sort of agendas and things like that, and the message doesn't always get through. Whereas when you look at advertising these days, it's changed so much that we tend to see videos, get sound bites. The whole, you know, it's not just corporate parenting. It's the whole council needs to address this issue. We really ought to get our communications people to look at how we can change our communications to improve it, so that all of our councillors know exactly what their responsibilities are. Yeah.
Thank you. I don't know if anyone else has any comments. I was going to suggest the initial health assessments reviews added on there to see where we're up to with that as well.
Yeah.
Anything else at all? Okay. So I think that's the end of the items then. So that concludes the business of the meeting for this evening. Thank you very much to everyone for attending, and I now declare the meeting closed.
Lizzie, can I just say something?
Oh, sorry, Joy.
Can I just
Yes.
say before you go, as I'm not going to be on the committee anymore, and I'm not chair, I wish you all luck, Lizzie, with the chair. Just pursue it and keep digging away at it, because it is good. I'll be missing everybody, but I'll still see you around the offices. Obviously, I'm going on to do other things, but I wish you well. You know, I should keep my eye on you all.
Thank you very much, Councillor Redsall. Thank you.
Wish you luck with it, Lizzie.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for all your efforts, Joy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sheila, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to say good luck to Councillor Redsall, and yes, he's done some great work for corporate parenting and looked after children in the authority. So thank you for that, Joy. I wish you well, whatever you're doing next. They'll be very lucky.
Pleasure working with you. I'm not going anywhere.
No, so I mean, well, whatever you're doing in the council, they'll be very lucky.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you.